What drives us? What motivates our kids? Welcome to the Resilient Kid podcast. I'm Ashley Costello, psychotherapist and founder here. So this is the first episode in our mini-series on motivation. What fuels it, what blocks it, and also how do we build more of it, particularly for our kids and teens. So when most of us think about motivation, we picture that sheer willpower, don't we? Pushing harder, working longer, forcing ourselves to keep going. But science tells us motivation isn't about being a robot. It's about energy. It's about purpose. It's how our brain and body work together to drive us forward. And here at the Resilient Kid, we always start with explaining to kids and teens when we're working with them about how our brain works. So I thought today I would tell you a little bit about how motivation works and how our brain is involved in that. So let's start with the basics. Intrinsic motivation, that internal stuff, extrinsic motivation. So psychology often divide it into two types. So extrinsic is when we do something for reward, like a sticker chart, money, grades, praise, or avoiding punishment. So things like if your child is practicing the piano and they get a sticker at the end, that's an external extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is when you do something because it feels good, because you're interested in it, because you're meaningful. Now, we always say, don't we? We know that if it comes to homework, kids maybe, particularly teens, they'll get it done eventually. Give them a computer game or something they're really interested in. You don't need to mow it. They are on it. Absolutely. So that same child that we just talked about playing the piano might do it just simply because they love listening to how it sounds when they create music. Both types can work, but research shows us that internal intrinsic motivation is much stronger in the long run. And if we connect what we do with curiosity, enjoyment, or purpose, we will stick to it. And we'll feel better while we're at it. It's not such a slog. So, let's get to the sciencey bit. What's going on inside our brains? Well, dopamine is talked about a huge amount at the moment. So, it's kind of having its day in neuroscience. It's one of the key chemicals involved. Many people call it the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine is about anticipation, really. It spikes when we expect something good, not just when we have something good. When we take steps towards a goal or when we see progress, that's when it's seen. That's why ticking off a task off your list feels so satisfying. Your brain gives you a little hit of dopamine as a reward for moving forward. I don't know about you, but sometimes I will, at the end of the day, write a list of the things I've already done and tick them off, even though they're done. Why am I writing them down? I think it is for that little dopamine hit. Yes, I feel like even if I've still got loads on the list, I feel like I've achieved something. Another piece of the puzzle where kind of science is involved is self-determination theory. It was developed by psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. Now, they found that motivation thrives when we've got three needs met. One, autonomy, having that sense of choice and control. Competence, feeling capable when we see ourselves improve at something. And then relatedness, so feeling connected to others and supported. And it's really interesting that those three, we see those three in motivation. It is because for me, when these three needs are nurtured, particularly at school, or we might see it in the workplace or at home, then it just flows. It doesn't have to be forced. And we don't actually have to nag our kids to do it when you see these, which is just brilliant, isn't it? That's what we want. So let's just go a little bit further into them. So autonomy, having that sense of control, what do we mean by that? So feeling more motivated when we feel like we've chosen what to do rather than being nagged or forced into it. Doesn't mean complete freedom, but it does mean having a say. So for instance, for kids, that might be letting a child choose whether to do homework at the kitchen table or in their bedroom. Still leads to the same outcome. The homework gets done, but the sense of choice makes them more willing. It's feeding into that theory we just talked about. For teens, it might be they choose a subject to revise first and usually often stick with revision longer than if somebody else dictates the schedule. Now, schools are quite good at this if they show how to revise and they show what topics in a subject area to revise, but then give the kids a blank timetable to choose themselves, because also as well, sometimes we might be more in a mood to do English, say, than to do maths. However, we might be worried a little bit about maths, so choose to do the teens might choose to do that first to get it out of the way and feel better for it, less anxious and stuff. What's it like for us as adults? Well, at work, having some autonomy, like picking the order you tackle your tasks in, having input on a project, will boost engagement and effort, and that's what we want. Competence, and what does that look like? That feeling capable and seeing yourself improve. Well, when we're motivated, when we believe we can do something, then we see that progress over time. Without this, tasks feel overwhelming and often pointless. So for kids, a child learning to swim might feel discouraged if thrown in at the deep end. Although, can I just say, when I was learning to swim, we had this very famous, only in our area by the way, swim teacher called Mrs. Manley, and there was a high diver. Now this high diver was Olympic height. We had like the best swimming pool in the area, and I think it was because we live near a river, so there was a real push from the local authority to get all the kids to learn to swim, and particularly because like my mum learnt to swim in that river, so they wanted to make sure that the kids weren't learning to swim in the river. But what she used to do, Mrs. Manley, is she would take us to the high diver and she would hold us and then let us go. And did it do us any harm? Not at all. We were all right. However, would I recommend it now? Probably not. But yeah, so it is that, some of us would have been put off for life, absolutely. But starting small, things like building up, starting with floats, gradually swimming small, short, widths to build confidence. Those little wins help kids keep going. What does that look like for teens? Well, a teen learning guitar who masters one song feels capable, and that sense of progress really encourages them to try a harder piece. Now, it's really funny because I think that often and not all music teachers by the way, but often with music teachers, they go through all the chords, they tell you all about the guitar, and it's lovely, but that's not helping motivation. Just doing scales is not building that competence and the internal motivation that we want. For adults, so in the workplace, training that breaks down a complex skill, for instance public speaking, into small achievable steps help people feel confident, so they're motivated to practice. Now, the lovely Catherine Sandland, who's a friend of Resilient Kid, she runs speaking stuff and she's really good, and I've been there when she's done this, breaking down it into small bits and then putting it together at the end. And by the end of like her workshops are, you suddenly are able to speak in public and you think, oh my goodness. Whereas often, one of the largest fears that we have is speaking in public. And so breaking it down into small bite-sized chunks and then mastering those little chunks and then putting it together, you suddenly go, oh, I can do this. Like that fear is gone. So that's, she does that really well. Relatedness, feeling connected to others and also feeling supported. So we thrive when we feel like we're doing, what matters to others and that we're not alone. As human beings, we are wired for connection. And, I always say it is the absolute most important component for me in resilience. All of them are important, but feeling connected helps us with everything. So motivation often increases when relationships are part of the picture. So what does that mean? Well, for kids, a child who plays football isn't just motivated by scoring goals, it's also about being part of a team, celebrated when they succeed, supported when they miss, and that's a lovely thing about team sports, isn't it? And there is some fantastic coaches out there, but there are also some parents that I've seen on the sidelines that are like, booing when kids miss. I'm like, get a grip, please. Like, this is a kid's sport, back off. I actually this week have seen one of the New Zealand players, and I can't think of her name off the top, but she's really famous, that famous I can't remember her name, but really famous, and she's a New Zealand player. Now they didn't win, but what she came out and said is that she has never seen that amount of people at a final for a women's sport ever, and B, that she said she walked in, in a different country. She's not in her home turf, and everyone cheered and loads of people knew her name, and the girls were just so like lovely and giving her like little bracelets and things like that. And she said, the support, she literally cried from the coach to getting into the stadium. She said the support that they had for the women's game was second to none. And actually feeling part of something is so important, and I think we often don't see that in the men's game, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's been around longer, but definitely in women's football, but particularly in women's rugby, only because I know more about women's rugby because Erin plays that, but the support for each other and the camaraderie and that connection is huge. It is so big. And if we're talking about motivating our kids into sports to keep them physically healthy and mentally healthy, then that's what we want to see. That support for each other, not just for our own team. So for teens, how do we see relatedness in there? Well, it's a teenager's more likely to engage with a school project if they're working in a group, if that they're connected with, though. That's the key. Often I see teachers go, right, you're gonna work together, and that's okay if you are going to do something that is going to help them feel more connected. It's not enough just that they've got to year 10, so of course you must know everybody, but actually, build in a exercise where they connect more before the school project. All right. If you're a teacher, show genuine interest in their effort, and you're halfway there. Like, absolutely. For us adults in the workplace, people are motivated to push through challenges when they feel their manager has their back, or when they know their work contributes to something bigger than themselves, that mission. So for me, with the coaches, it's not just about them, help getting more clients or making more money. It's about the difference that they make. And we talk about that all the time. It's about, the bigger picture. We want to reach 1 million kids, things like that. It's not just, and we're all in it together. It's a mutual mission, and that's what we mean when it's related. We're connected by that common theme, that mission. So these three needs, autonomy, competence, and relatedness, explain why, some environments naturally boost motivations while others drain it. But actually, it's easy to make tweaks. So for example, a classroom that offers choices, celebrates the small wins, celebrates effort, and builds that team spirit will be more engaged learners, 100%. And a workplace that does the same will see employees going that extra mile, So that's, I think for me, it seems like a small theory, but self-determination theory has a lot to unpack and actually would really help us in the home and in the classroom. So let me give you an example. Let me give you what we call real world story. So I worked with a teenager who dreaded revision for exams. Now, we were lucky because they had enough time. They were in year 10, not year 11. So we had enough time to try and build this in. Parents had tried rewards, they'd tried bribes, none of it helped. And, it might have helped for a little bit, but the motivation never lasted. So what we did was link the revision to her dream of becoming a vet. And everything shifted from that external motivation, that extrinsic that we were talking about before, we shifted to an internal. Because she saw revision as not as a chore, but a stepping stone towards that bigger picture, that bigger purpose, helping animals, doing the job that she loved. She imagined getting up every day and going in to look after animals, to nurture them, to help them feel better, to work as part of a team that do that. And, eventually she wanted to work in a zoo. And so we said, and this comes from James, I want to say Clear, from Atomic Habits. Everything she did was either going towards or away from that big goal. And so her revision was those steps towards it. But also, what else changed for her? Well, two things. She had autonomy over it. She chose her career path. She felt the competence the more that she did it. Her effort was building those skills. And she had relatedness. Her family and I cheered her on. And she knew what she was doing it for. And yeah, it was brilliant. The science of motivation is there, literally, in that story. So I'm going to do a few podcasts on this. So this is going to be like the first of a series. If you've got questions on how to motivate your kid, then, or your teen, or maybe, you're a teacher and you want to know how to motivate your class, then drop us a message. Either come over to the village on Facebook, our free Facebook group, and drop us, you can do it anonymously if you want, drop us a message there. Put a comment underneath the podcast, wherever you listen to it, or email me at ashley@theresilientkid.co.uk. So, a little reflection for you and takeaway. Write down 3 things, and you can do this, as the adults listening, or you can ask your kids to do this. Write down 3 things you do, even if nobody paid you, praised you, or rewarded you. Now, these clues are your intrinsic motivators. They sparks that naturally energize you, and you're likely to see science playing out. Autonomy, competence, and connection. And those little dopamine hits that I was telling you about when I do my tick list, when you move forward. So, and let me know. I'd love to hear what are those 3 things. In the next episode, we talk about why sometimes you don't do the things that matter most, procrastination, resistance, and some small tools that can help you break through that cycle. But for today, notice what truly drives you, the things that light you up from the inside, because that's where the real motivation is. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next motivation episode, and lots of love from us to you. Bye for now.